Hey everybody, happy Wednesday and welcome to the 22nd day of the season of joy. I hope that these lessons have been joyful to you and that you found joy in them, and I hope that you will continue to seek joy through the remainder of the season and into the year to come. My family and I made the decision at the beginning of the month that we were going to read a chapter of Luke a day from the first of the month through Christmas Eve. There being 24 chapters in the book of Luke, we decided to read one chapter a day for the first through the 24th days of the month. If you've never done that, if you haven't made that decision or haven't taken that challenge, I encourage you to do so. Whether it's next year or the years to come, it's been a very edifying experience, and there's a lot that I think we can glean from the Gospel of Luke. I want to share something with you today that comes from Luke chapter 22, being the 22nd day. This is our reading from the day, and it got me thinking. Beginning in verse 1, it says, "Now the feast of the unleavened bread, called the Passover, was approaching, and the chief priests and the teachers of the law were looking for some way to get rid of Jesus, for they were afraid of the people. Then Satan entered Judas, called Iscariot, one of the 12. And Judas went to the chief priests and the officers of the temple guard and discussed with them how they might betray Jesus. They were delighted and agreed to give him money. He consented and watched for an opportunity to hand Jesus over to them when no crowd was present." We know that Jesus knew what was going to happen, and we know that Jesus knew exactly who had betrayed him or was going to betray him. And yet he doesn't call him out during the Passover feast, the Passover meal. Instead, going down to verse 31, Peter turns his attention to Peter, also called Simon. He says, "Simon, Simon, Satan has asked to sift you as wheat, but I have prayed for you, Simon, that your faith may not fail, and when you have turned back, strengthen your brothers." I want to draw a couple of comparisons between these two people, or really actually contrast them. Judas being the one who obviously betrayed Jesus and was the reason that Jesus was taken to the cross to begin with. And Peter, who was one of the most faithful, one of the most self-sacrificing, one of the most audacious disciples, sometimes almost to a fault, that followed Jesus. But Peter failed in his faith. We know that Jesus said in verse 34, he said, "I tell you, Peter, before the rooster crows today, you will deny me. You will deny 3 times that you know me." Then Jesus asked them some other things. We won't talk about that. But as Jesus is taken into Jerusalem from the Mount of Olives, after he's taken away from the disciples, Peter follows behind him. We find out later in verse 54 that Peter goes through the exercise of denying Jesus the 3 times. And of course, the rooster crows. And the thing that hit me, I think, very interesting here, verse 60, Peter replied, "Man, I don't know what you're talking about," which is the 3rd denial. And just as he was speaking, the rooster crowed. The Lord turned and looked straight at Peter. Then Peter remembered the word of the Lord. The word the Lord has spoken to him. "Before the rooster crows today, you will disown me 3 times." And he went outside and wept bitterly. I can't imagine the amount of pain, emotional distress that Peter must have felt, having looked his Lord in the eye after denying him the way that Jesus said that he would. But looking further into these two people, we know after the story pans out, after Jesus' crucifixion, that Judas overcome with remorse, can't find it himself to live on any longer, and goes to a field and hangs himself. He can't do it anymore. He sent his Lord to the grave. Peter, on the other hand, overcame his failure. We know that Jesus comes to Peter after his resurrection and says, "Peter, do you love me?" And of course, Peter says, "Of course I do." And Jesus says, "Then take care of my sheep." And by that, Jesus is saying, be the good steward of my faith, or of my family. Take care of my family. Be part of my church and strengthen the brethren. Just like he said here in verse 32 of chapter 22 of Luke. He said, strengthen the brethren. And we know, because we have the whole picture here, Peter does just that. We all fail in life. We fail to uphold the faith that we have in our lives. And when it gets tough, we have a choice to make. Will we be like Judas, who is just overcome with guilt to the point where he can't continue to move on? His faith isn't growing anymore. His faith, in fact, shatters completely. Or should we be like Peter, who overcomes that failure in our own lives and learns from it and grows from it and ultimately strengthens the brethren because of it? Which one are you today? Which one am I today? I hope, and my challenge is this, not just tomorrow, not just through the end of the season, but each and every day of our lives that we fail, which is inevitably every day of our lives, that we strengthen the brethren by our overcoming of our failures. Jesus is gracious enough to die on a cross for us. We should never give up on him. Have you made the decision to join the Lord's church? If you've not made the decision to do that, I implore you to recognize that Jesus did in fact die on a cross for you. He may have been born and lived on earth as a man, but he was fully God, and he fully died for our sins. I want to study the Bible with you. I want you to learn that, and I want to guide you through this and help you to understand what it takes to become a member of Christ's church. Will you please send me an email to PorterBibleStudy@gmail.com? And I want to learn, I want you to learn, and I want to learn with you. I want you to remember who you are, whose you are, and go let your light shine.